It was a Wednesday in February, and I was driving to the pharmacy on Linden Avenue to pick up my husband's blood pressure medication, which is the kind of errand you do without thinking about it, in the middle of the afternoon with the radio turned down low. The sky over Marlow in February is not a color. It is a lid. I had the heater on too, and my sunglasses were still clipped to the visor because there was nothing that day to shield my eyes from. The shop is 4 blocks before the pharmacy on the right, and I have driven past it so many thousands of times that I do not look at it anymore, the way you do not look at your own hallway. But there was something red on it that afternoon, and red is a thing your eye takes before your brain does. I was slowing down before I understood that I was slowing down. It was a banner, bright red vinyl, about 8 feet of it, zip-tied across the front of the left bay door at the height of a man's chest. Sold, it said in white block letters and underneath in smaller type, Kellner Automotive Group. The zip ties were new. They were still that milk-white color they are before a winter gets to them. I turned into the lot and parked at an angle across 2 spaces, which I do not think I have done once in my adult life, and I did not shut the engine off. I sat there with the wipers going every 12 seconds, and I did the one thing I know how to do when something is wrong, which is count. 3 cars still inside. I could see them through the glass panels at the top of the bay doors. The blue Tacoma belongs to Rita Sandoval, who teaches 4th grade at Marlow Elementary and who has been bringing that truck to my father since it was still under warranty. The gray Impala belongs to a man named Dennis Kubiak. The 3rd one I could not see well enough to name, and that bothered me more than it had any right to. 3 cars inside means 3 people who do not know yet. That was my first clear thought. Not. My father sold the shop. Not. He did not call me. My first clear thought was that on Friday afternoon Rita Sandoval was going to walk up to a bay door with somebody else's name on the paperwork. The sign above the doors was still up, Vance Auto, and under it, in the smaller letters my mother picked out in 1994 when they redid the front, serving Marlow since 1979. Somebody had bought the business and the building and the lift and the compressor and every account in the book, and they had not gotten to the sign yet, because a sign is always the last thing. I want to be honest about what I felt because I have had a year to think about it. I did not feel rage. I felt something I can only describe as my work coming down over me like a visor. 16 years of running payroll for a school district teaches you that when a number is wrong, raising your voice at the number does not move it. You go quiet. You go find the document. I did not go in. The office lights were on, and his truck was not there, which meant Dale was in there by himself, and I could have walked up to that door and had the entire thing explained to me in 90 seconds by a man who has known me since I was 11. I have gone back over why I did not, and the honest answer is that I did not want Dale to have to be the one to tell me. There is a particular kind of protecting people do around a thing like this, where everybody spends their energy making sure the news arrives from the correct person, and the result is that it arrives from a banner. I did that too. I am not above it. I have done it my whole life. I sat in that lot for 11 minutes. I know it was 11 because I looked at the clock when I pulled in and I looked at it again when I pulled out. And for the whole 11 minutes, the thing I kept circling back to was not my father at all. It was a green hardback book sitting on my kitchen table 4 miles away, where it had been sitting since the 26th, because the 26th is when it always comes home. I am a payroll accountant for Marlow Consolidated School District. 16 years, same desk, 2nd floor of the administration building, a window that looks at the back of the bus barn. There is a spider plant on the filing cabinet that I have kept alive since the Obama administration, and a laminated card taped to my monitor that says the cutoff times for the 2 pay cycles, which I have not needed to read since about 2012. 1,140 people get paid because of what I do on the 22nd and the 7th. Teachers, aides, custodians, cafeteria, the 4 women in transportation who dispatch the buses, the man who does the boilers. If I am wrong, a person opens an app on a Friday morning and the number is not the number, and their whole weekend becomes about that. People think the job is arithmetic. It is not arithmetic. The computer does the arithmetic. The job is noticing. It is looking at 400 lines that are all fine and feeling your eyes snag on the one that is fine in a slightly different way. In my 3rd year, I caught a health insurance deduction that had doubled on one man's check, a bus driver named Art Pelfrey, because a code had been entered twice in a system upgrade. It was $184. Nobody had called about it. It had been happening for 2 months, and Art had just been living on $184 less, twice a month, without saying a word to anyone. That is the part of the job that stayed with me. Not that the error happened, that he did not call. I got the money back into his account, and he thanked me in the parking lot 2 weeks later, and then he said, and I have never forgotten the way he said it, he said he had figured he must have signed up for something. The 22nd and the 7th are the 2 days of my month that are not negotiable for anything. Nell's high school graduation was on a 22nd, and I was at my desk until 11:40 and made it to the field house at 12:15, and Paul saved me a seat, and I have never once been late to a cycle in 16 years, which is either dedication or the other thing, depending on who is describing me. People do not tell you they're short. They absorb it, and they assume the shortfall is somehow their own fault, and then they go quiet about it. I have seen that 100 times from behind a desk. It took me a great deal longer to see it in a mirror. I do not raise my voice. I want to be clear that this is not a virtue. It is closer to a condition. My husband Paul says I get more polite the angrier I am, which he means as a joke, and which is also the single most accurate thing anyone has ever said about me. 22 years married in June. Paul teaches shop and drafting at the high school, which used to be a thing you could still say without a small speech attached to it. Our daughter Nell is 20 and at Purdue and calls on Sunday nights, and when she calls she talks to her grandfather for longer than she talks to me, which never once bothered me, and I think that is worth saying out loud before the rest of this. There is a woman in food service named Ruthie Amato who is logged at part-time hours for a semester and a half in 2017 because of the way a building code got entered when they reorganized the elementary kitchens. She did not call either. When I found it, she cried in my office, and it was not about the money. It was because she had spent 5 months believing that somebody had decided she was worth fewer hours. So I know what a hole in a paycheck does to a person, and it is almost never the arithmetic. It is the story the person builds to explain the whole. That is the thing I have spent 16 years standing between people and from a desk on the 2nd floor with a spider plant on the filing cabinet. I am the one in the family with the handwriting. That sounds like nothing. In my family, it was a job description. My mother had it, and when she died, I inherited it the way you inherit a serving dish, without anyone deciding anything. My mother's name was Dolores. She kept the books for the shop from 1979 until the spring of 2019, in pencil, in a green hardback ledger she bought at a stationery store in Lafayette that has not existed since before I was born. When she died, there were 4 inches of pages left in it, and my father did not want a new one. That Thanksgiving, 5 months after the funeral, he brought it to my house in a paper grocery sack and set it on the counter next to the pie and said, "You have got her handwriting." That was the entire negotiation. There was no other sentence. He went back in and watched the second half of the game. So it has a rhythm now, and the rhythm is this. On the 26th of every month, one of the guys drops the ledger off on his way home, or I stop and get it. It lives on the kitchen table until the 30th. I enter the month, I total the columns, I take it back. 12 years of that. It is the most ordinary object in my house, and it is the reason I am telling you any of this. My father's name is Ray Vance. He opened the shop in September of 1979 in a building that had been a feed store, and before that a Studebaker dealership, 2 bays and a parts counter, and a bathroom you had to go outside to get to until 1991. He was 26. He had $4,000 and a cousin who co-signed. Marlow is 11,000 people in the flat part of Indiana, the part where you can watch a storm arrive for 40 minutes before it gets to you. There is a Kroger, a hospital that is really a clinic with ambitions for churches, and a road out to the interstate with the new places on it. Linden Avenue is the old road. Everything on Linden Avenue was built before somebody decided where the town was actually going to go. For 47 years, if your car made a noise in this town, you took it to my father. That is not nostalgia, it is arithmetic. There were 2 other shops and both of them closed, one in 1998 and one in 2011. There were 4 men working there when this happened. Hollis Bright, who is 62 and has been there since 1988, and who has a laugh you can hear from the parts counter with both bay doors open. Manny Ocasio, 44, transmissions, the best diagnostic hands my father ever hired, and he has said so out loud, which for him is a parade. Dale Caints, 51, who does the front counter and the scheduling, and who is the reason the shop has a computer at all. And Trey Bowden, who is 26, which is the age my father was when he opened the doors, and who I do not think has ever once noticed that.
For men.
For households. Between them, if you count the kids and the 2 ex-wives with support orders, something like 14 people who eat because of what comes out of that building on the 1st of the month. I have known that number for 12 years the way you know your own weight. The building still smelled like the feed store for the first 2 years. My mother told me that. She said you could not get it out of the block walls, and that in August it would come back, a dry, sweet smell underneath the oil, and that she stopped noticing it sometime around when I was born, and then never smelled it again for 40 years. There is a back staircase off the parts room with 3 concrete steps, and the second one is a half-inch shorter than the other 2. Whoever poured it in 1954 got tired. Every person who has ever worked in that building learns it in their feet in about a week and then never thinks about it again. And every person who has ever delivered a part there has stumbled on it at least once. I did my homework at the parts counter from 2nd grade until I could drive. There is a specific sound a shop makes at 4 in the afternoon, an impact wrench going somewhere behind you and the radio on the country station, and a man saying a number out loud to another man, and if you played it for me right now I could tell you what month it was. The shop was never rich. I need you to understand that it was also never poor. Exactly. It was a small business in a small town, which means it was 1 transmission job away from fine, and 1 January away from not fine, over and over for 4 decades. Some months everything is a break job and everything is cash, and the checks clear on the 1st without anybody thinking about it. And then February comes and the college kids are gone, and the county salts the roads so hard that everybody with a rust problem just decides to live with the noise until spring. My mother handled that for 40 years, and I only understood how after she was gone. She did it by moving money around inside a single checking account with the precision of a person defusing something, and by never once telling my father what she had done, because he would have gotten in the truck and driven around collecting on his own accounts, and he would have lost half of them doing it. She had a system, and the system was 3 pencil marks. A dot next to an account meant call them in a week. A dot with a circle meant they are good for it, do not call. And a small check mark meant she had already quietly moved something, and the matter was closed. I found 40 years of those marks in that book, and it took me until about 2016 to understand that the check marks were a confession she had been making, in pencil, where nobody would ever look. which means I was not the first. I want to say that here rather than at the end because I did not know it at the time, and it would have changed the 12 years if I had. My mother did it too. She just did it inside one account instead of two, and she had the advantage of being married to him, which meant nobody ever asked where a number came from. He is not a hard man. I want to be careful here. He is a man who solves things alone, and in one move. That is the whole shape of him, and every good thing about my childhood and every bad thing about this story comes out of that same shape. When I was 9, I wanted a bicycle that cost more than a bicycle should cost. I did not get a speech about saving up. I got a bicycle in March on a Tuesday with no occasion attached to it, and I found out 11 years later from my mother that he had sold a shotgun that had been his father's to do it. That is him. He does not discuss the thing. He goes and does the thing, and then the thing is done, and discussing it afterwards strikes him as a kind of showing off. In 2011, the transmission shop out on Route 9 closed, and everybody said business would double. It did not double. What happened instead was that the work got harder because we started getting the cars the other shop had been keeping alive with tape, and my father started staying until 7. Manny came in 2009 from a dealership in Kokomo where he had been told, in a meeting, that his diagnostic times were outside the standard. He is the fastest honest mechanic I have ever watched work. What the dealership meant was that he was spending 40 minutes finding out what was actually wrong instead of 11 minutes replacing whatever the screen suggested. My father hired him on a Tuesday after watching him for 1 hour and never once, in 16 years, gave him a title. Manny has said he does not need one. I believe him, and I also think a title would have cost my father nothing, and those two things are both true and have never been said in the same room. In 2013, the building needed a roof. He did the roof. I found out about the roof by driving past and seeing a roof. And in November of 2013, 3 weeks after that roof, the ledger came home on the 26th, and the number at the bottom of the payroll column was larger than the number at the bottom of the deposits column, and it was the first time I had ever seen that happen in my mother's book or in mine. I have thought a great deal about what an ordinary person does in that moment, and I think an ordinary person calls their father. I sat at my kitchen table on a Tuesday night in November of 2013 with a green book open in front of me and a difference of $1,140, and I did not call my father. I opened a savings account at the credit union in Delphi instead. Delphi is 22 minutes away. I told a young man at the desk that it was for a home project. That was the first lie, and it was so small that I did not notice myself telling it. On the 28th of that month, I moved $1,140 from that account into the shop's account, and on the 1st of December, Hollis and Manny and Dale and the man who worked there before Trey were paid in full and on time, and nobody, including my father, had any reason to think anything at all. I told myself it was 1 month. I remember the exact sentence I used on myself, which was, "This is a bridge, not a habit." It happened again in February, then in March, which surprised me because March is usually fine. By the end of 2014, I had a small ritual, and the ritual was this. The ledger comes home on the 26th, I total the columns on the 27th, and on the 28th, if there is a hole, I fill the hole. Some months it was nothing. Some months it was $200, which is not even a real amount, which is a dinner out. In July of 2016, it was $180, and I remember laughing at it. In the second winter, it was $9,200. That was the compressor, and a January where it did not get above 20 degrees for 19 days, and half the town decided to hear the noise until spring. $9,200 in 1 month, out of a savings account, into a business account, on a Thursday from a woman making $61,000 a year at a school district. Paul, And I had money because we are careful and because we are boring. We took one vacation in 11 years, and it was to see Nell's roommate's family in Michigan. I drove a 2009 Camry until last spring. I want to be clear that nobody suffered for what I did. That is not the confession here. The confession is that I never told him. Not my father. Not Paul. 22 years married, and there was a savings account in Delphi that my husband did not know the balance of, and when I say it in that order, it sounds like the beginning of an entirely different kind of story, and I understand that, and I have no defense except the true one, which is that it never once felt like a secret while I was keeping it. It felt like the water bill. The woman at the credit union in Delphi is named Bev, and she has been at the same window for 9 of those 12 years. She knows my name. She has never once asked me why a school district employee from Marlow drives 22 minutes to make a transfer she could make on her phone, and I have never volunteered it. And we have talked about her hip replacement and her daughter's wedding and the weather across a counter for 9 years like two people who understand each other perfectly. That is what secrecy actually looks like, incidentally. It is not dramatic. It is a pleasant woman named Bev and a 22-minute drive and a parking lot with a flowering pear tree in it that I have watched bloom 12 times. The closest I ever came to telling him was October of 2019, 5 months after my mother died. He had come for dinner, and he was doing that thing where he holds a fork and does not eat with it, and he said, apropos of nothing, that he did not know how she had made it work all those years. And there was a gap of about 4 seconds where I could have said it, and I have played those 4 seconds back more times than I can tell you. What I said instead was, she was good at it. And he said she was. And Paul asked somebody to pass the salad. The year Nell started at Purdue was the worst one. Tuition and the shop had a bad March, and I moved $4,100 out of the Delphi account on the 28th of April and then sat in the parking lot under the pear tree and did the math on my phone for 11 minutes to make sure the fall payment would still clear.
It did.
It was going to. I just needed to see it. Here is the thing nobody tells you about doing something quietly for a long time. The first month, it is a decision. By the 4th month, it is a routine. And somewhere around the 3rd year, it stops being either of those and becomes a fact about the world, like the fact that the second step on the shop's back stairs is a ½ inch shorter than the other 2. The transfer itself takes about 40 seconds. That is the part that I think would surprise people. A slip, a window, a woman named Bev, a receipt printed on paper so thin you can read it from the back. 40 seconds, 22 minutes each way, and 4 men get paid on the first. And every time driving back on County Road 300 with the receipt in the cup holder, I would tell myself the same 2 things in the same order. That I would tell him when the shop had a good year, and that it was not really a secret because it was written down. Both of those were true, technically, which is the most dangerous kind of true there is. The shop never had the good year, and it was written down in a book that only I ever read. 141 times. I did not know that number while it was happening. I counted it afterward in one sitting at that same table, and I had to start over twice because my hand kept losing its place on the page. 12 years. 141 transfers. The smallest was $180. The largest was $9,200. Between them, all told, a little over $206,000, which is not a number I can look at even now without having to set the book down for a second. And every single one of them got written into the ledger. Of course it did. I am the one who writes in the ledger. There is a column on the right side of my mother's page layout, the last column before the binding, headed in her hand, in 1979, with 2 words, covered by. For 40 years, that column said things like deposit or carryover, or on 3 occasions in the 80s, loan, Merchants BK. Starting in November of 2013, it started saying something else. It started saying C. Vance. I need to stop here and tell you about my father properly, because if I do not, you're going to spend the rest of this story thinking he is a man who did a cruel thing to his daughter, and that is not what happened, and the true version is worse and better at the same time. Ray Vance is 71. He gets to the shop at 6:40, and he has since 1979, and he does that because he likes the 40 minutes before anyone else arrives, when the only sound is the compressor filling.
He drinks his coffee standing up.
He has never once in his life sat down to eat breakfast. He can tell you what is wrong with a car from the parking lot. Not always, but often enough that Manny, who is genuinely brilliant and half his age, still walks out and gets him when something has him stuck. He taught me to drive in the lot behind the shop in a 1984 Cutlass with a bad idle, and his entire method of instruction was to sit in the passenger seat and say nothing at all for 40 minutes. When I did something wrong, he would make a small noise. That was the whole curriculum. I have never been in a car with a calmer human being, and I passed the test on the first try. He has never in his life given anyone a compliment with a person's name attached to it in front of them. He does it behind your back, at volume, to strangers. I found out in 2015 from a woman at the bank that my father had told half of Marlowe that his daughter runs the money for the entire school district, which is not what my job is, and which he had apparently been saying for years. Those two facts about him sit right next to each other and never touch. He will tell a teller in a bank lobby that he is proud of me and he will not tell me, and he does not experience that as a contradiction. And if you pointed it out, he would look at you the way he looked at me about going to the shop on the Monday after the funeral. After my mother died, he did not fall apart, which frightened me more than falling apart would have. He went to the shop on the Monday. He had the funeral on the Saturday, and he went to the shop on the Monday, and when I said something about it, he looked at me like I had suggested he skip breathing. He and my mother were married 41 years, and I never once heard them discuss money in front of me. Not once. I used to think that meant there was none to discuss. What it actually meant was that they had an arrangement in which she handled it and he was allowed not to know, and that both of them preferred it that way, and that the arrangement was load-bearing. When she got sick, he was at the hospital every day at 6:40 in the morning, which is when he gets to the shop, because that is the only time his body knows how to start something. He would sit there until 8 and then go open the bays.
10 weeks of that.
He never asked anyone to come with him, and he never told anyone he was going. Nell was 15 then, and she is the only person alive who can get a full sentence out of him about my mother. I have watched it happen at my own table, and I do not understand the mechanism. She asks him something enormous in a completely flat voice, the way you would ask about a fuse, and he answers it. Here is what I did not know until it was much too late, and I want to lay it out plainly because he never would. In the spring before all of this, he started dropping things. Small things at first, the way it goes. A 10mm socket out of his right hand onto the concrete, which happens to everyone. Then a coffee cup in his own kitchen. Then, in July, a torque wrench, which is the kind of thing that a man who has held a torque wrench for 50 years does not drop, and Hollis saw it happen and did not say anything, and my father knew Hollis saw it and did not say anything either. He went to the clinic in August. He drove himself at 7 in the morning and told the front desk he was there about his shoulder. He has never told me what they said. What I know from Dale, who is the one who found the appointment card in the truck console in April of the following year, after all of this was over, and who sat in my driveway for a long time before he decided to bring it to me. 8 months. From that August to that February, he got up at 6:40 every morning and went and opened a building full of things that required 2 working hands and did not say one word to any of us. I have tried to imagine those 8 months, and I can only get about a day into it before I have to stop. Every morning, he would have found out again. That is the part. It is not one piece of bad news. It is the same piece of bad news arriving 400 times, every time he reached for something. And the thing he would have been doing in his head the entire time is arithmetic. Not self-pity. Arithmetic.
For men.
14 people. A building with a new roof on it, and a compressor that owed him nothing. Because here's the thing about my father that is genuinely admirable, and that ruined everything. He does not think a problem is real until he has already solved it. Telling someone about a problem you have not solved yet is, in his understanding of the world, a way of making it their problem. He sold the shotgun. He did the roof. He drove himself to the clinic at 7 in the morning and told the front desk it was his shoulder. It is all one man doing one thing over and over for 50 years, and every single time, the people who loved him found out afterward, from a bicycle or a roof or a red banner. Kellner Automotive Group made him an offer in April, unsolicited, the way those companies do, a letter with a number in it. He did not answer it. He kept it. Dale says it was in the drawer under the register from April to November, and that he saw it in there more than once. So the 8 months were not 8 months of hiding an illness. They were 8 months of a man walking past an envelope in a drawer every single day, doing the arithmetic, and losing. It was a Tuesday in November. Trey has told me this part 4 times now, and it comes out the same every time, which is how you know somebody is not decorating it. They had a Silverado up on the lift with a leaking rear main, which is an unpleasant job and a long one, and my father was doing it himself because Manny was buried in something else, and because he still did the ugly jobs himself at 71, which was a point of pride nobody was allowed to mention. He asked Trey for a half-inch socket. Trey handed it to him, and my father's right hand came up and took it, and then did not close. Trey says it was not dramatic. He says the socket did not even fall, that it sort of rolled off the side of his father's hand, is what he called it. He calls him his father, they all do, and landed on the concrete and rolled maybe 2 feet and stopped against the base of the lift. And Ray Vance looked at his own hand for about 3 seconds. Trey was very specific about the 3 seconds. Then he said, "Get Hollis to finish this one," and he wiped his hands on the rag, and he walked out through the office and got in his truck and drove home. It was 10 in the morning. He had never left the shop before 4 o'clock on a workday in 47 years. Not when I was born. Not when my mother had her gallbladder out. Dale told me he stood in the doorway and watched the truck go up Linden, and he said out loud to nobody, "Well, that is that." Dale knew. I want to say that plainly because I spent a while being angry at Dale about it, and it was not fair. Dale had known since about September, in the way you know something you have not been told, and there is not one thing a man in his position could have done with that except keep the schedule running. Hollis finished the Silverado. That is the detail I keep. A 62-year-old man walked over and got under a truck that another man had walked away from in the middle of and finished it, and did not say anything to anybody about why, and the customer picked it up at 4:30 and paid and drove home, and has no idea to this day that anything happened in that building that morning. That is what a shop is, and it is what my father built, and it is the exact thing he was about to sell without asking any of them, and I have never been able to hold those 3 facts in my hands at the same time without one of them slipping. My father got home at 10:15. He sat in the driveway for a while, because the neighbor mentioned it later. Then he went inside, and at 11:40, he called the number on the letter that had been in the drawer since April. The whole thing took 9 days. That is what stops me, still. 9 days from a socket rolling across a concrete floor to a signature. He did not use a lawyer of his own. He used theirs. The man from Kellner came on the Thursday. Dale says he was pleasant and about 40, and wore the kind of quarter zip that has a company logo on it, and that he walked the bays with a tablet and was genuinely complimentary about how the place was kept, and that he used the phrase legacy operator twice. Dale says the thing that stayed with him was that my father showed the man everything. The lift, the alignment rack, the roof. He took him up the back stairs and told him about the second step. Dale said it was like watching somebody give a tour of a house they had already moved out of. They signed on the Monday in an office in Lafayette at 2 in the afternoon. He drove himself. He stopped at the Arby's on the way back, which I know because the receipt was in the truck console with the appointment card, and I have thought about that receipt more than is reasonable. A roast beef and a small coffee, 2:41 in the afternoon, on the day he sold the thing. The number was $340,000 for the business, the building, the equipment, and the name. Kellner keeps the name for 18 months, and then it becomes a Kellner. That is standard. That is on page 4. They kept Manny and Trey. They kept Dale on a 6-month term as a shift lead, which is a way of saying they wanted the appointment calendar in his head. They did not keep Hollis Bright, who is 62 and who had been there since 1988, and whose severance was 4 weeks. Hollis Bright's last day was the following Friday. There was no party. Manny bought a cake at the Kroger, and they ate it standing up around the parts counter at 2 in the afternoon with the bays still open, and Hollis went around and shook everybody's hand, including my father's, and said, "Thank you, Ray." For weeks. 36 years and 4 weeks. That is not my father's doing. That is on page 6 of an agreement that a company in Lafayette has used 400 times, and it is also true that a man signed the page. I asked him about Hollis exactly once in the spring, and he said I got him the 4 weeks, which I did not understand until Dale explained that the original number was 2 and that my father had spent a phone call on it and had not gotten anything else he asked for. I found out about the banner on the Wednesday. The paperwork had closed on the Monday, so there were 2 days in there, 2 full days, where he could have picked up a phone, and I have decided not to spend the rest of my life on those 2 days, but I would be lying if I said I never think about them. I went on the Saturday, not the Wednesday, not the Thursday. I made myself wait 3 days, which I do not recommend to anybody because what waiting 3 days does is give you time to write the speech, and the speech is always the worst thing you bring with you. I wrote in the car in the driveway before I left, not on paper, in my head in order the way I would build a case for the superintendent. 12 years, 141, 206,000. Hollis is 62. I had it in order, and I was going to say it in order, and it was going to be devastating and reasonable at the same time. It is 4.5 minutes from my driveway to that lot. I have never in my life wished to drive for longer. The bays were shut. His truck was in the side lot where it has always been. The front door was unlocked, and the bell over it still made the same sound it has made my entire life. And he was behind the parts counter with a box of receipts and the register drawer out on the glass, alone on a Saturday, cleaning out a business he had already sold. There were 4 cardboard boxes on the floor behind him with dates written on the sides in marker, in his handwriting, which is nothing like mine and nothing like my mother's. He had already taken the calendar off the wall. There was a rectangle where it had been, cleaner than the wall around it, about 11 inches by 14. He looked up and said, "Hey, kiddo," which is what he has called me since I was 4. I had the speech. I had about 900 words of speech. And what came out of me instead, in a voice I did not recognize as mine because it was so reasonable, was, "You did not call me." He said, "It was not your business to be called about." And I said, "Dad, I have kept the books for that business for 12 years. He said, "Your mother kept the books. You do the handwriting." I want to tell you that I said something enormous then. I did not. I stood in front of the parts counter where I did my homework in 1987, and I said, "That is not fair," in the voice of a person asking for a receipt. And my father, who is not looking at me, who is pulling the 20s out of the register drawer and squaring them on the glass with the side of his hand because he cannot leave a stack crooked, said, "You were never really part of this place." Then he slid the green ledger across the counter toward me, the way you hand somebody back an umbrella they left at your house, and he said, "You might as well take that. There is nothing left in it for anybody." I took it. That is the whole thing I did. I picked up a green hardback book off a glass counter, and I said, "All right," and I walked out through a door with a bell on it. I did not cry in the parking lot. I have been asked that, and the answer is no, and I do not think it is because I am strong. I think it is because the visor was down. And then I drove 4 blocks up Linden, and I went into the pharmacy and I picked up Paul's blood pressure medication, which I had not picked up on the Wednesday, because on the Wednesday I had gotten as far as a parking lot and turned around and gone home. The woman at the counter is named Sherry, and she asked me how my dad was doing, and I said he was doing fine. That is the only lie in this whole story I would take back. I put the bag and the ledger on the passenger seat. And somewhere between the pharmacy and my own driveway, at a 4-way stop I have stopped at 10,000 times, I had the single most ordinary thought of my life, which was, the month is not finished. It was the 18th. The month runs to the 30th. There were 12 days of entries in that book that nobody had totaled, and I am the person who totals them, and the business being sold does not change the fact that a column that is not added up is a column that is not added up. So I went home, and I made coffee, and I sat down at my own kitchen table at 4 in the afternoon on a Saturday to finish the bookkeeping for a shop that no longer belonged to my family. And that is how I found it, not by investigating. By being tidy. I opened it to the last page with anything on it, and I went to add the column, and my did the thing it does at work. It snagged. At the bottom of every month's page, since 1979, there is a line for the owner to sign off on the closing balance.
My mother designed that line.
It is the last thing on the page under the totals, and it runs the full width, and there are 2 things on it, a date and a signature. And it sits directly beneath the covered by column. Directly beneath it. My mother laid that page out in 1979 so that the man signing it would have his pen an inch away from the answer to the only question that matters.
Vance.
In his hand. At the bottom of that page, and the one before it, and the one before that. I turned back a year.
Vance.
I turned back 5 years. R. Vance, and above it, 3 inches above it, in my handwriting, in the last column before the binding, C. Vance. $1,140. C. Vance. 200.
C. Vance.
9,200. 141 times. My father put his pen on that page and certified that the month closed correctly, and 141 times, 1 inch above where his pen went down, was my name and an amount. He never read the last column. Why would he? He read the totals, and the totals were right, and the totals were right because I had made them right, and a man who has signed the same line for 47 years is not reading anything by the end. He is signing that the month is closed. He is signing that everybody got paid. There is no villain in that. I want to say that as clearly as I can. He did not take anything from me. He was handed a piece of paper with the truth on it every month for 12 years by a woman who never said a word about it, and he did exactly what somebody hands you a page like that expects you to do. He signed at the bottom, and he went back to work. I did not take it to him. I want to be honest about how close I came. I got as far as the truck twice. What stopped me both times was the same thought, and the thought was, what am I bringing him this for? And there is only one answer to that question, and the answer is not a good one. I would have been bringing it so that he would have to look at it. That is all. $206,000 in his own signature so that a 71-year-old man with a hand that will not close would have to sit at a table and look at it. I told Paul that night. All of it, the account in Delphi, and the 12 years and the number. He listened the whole way through without saying anything, which is not like him. And then he said, "Why did you never tell me?" And I said, "Because you would have said it was fine." And he said, "Carrie, it was fine." And I said, "I know. That is why." Hollis Bright works at the Kroger now, in receiving, on the loading dock at 62. I see him. He is all right, in the way a man is all right. He asked after my father the first time, and he has not asked since, and I think about that more than I think about the money. My father and I are fine, which I know is going to disappoint some of you. He comes for dinner on Sundays. He cannot open a jar, and I open it, and neither of us mentions it. In the spring he told me, out of nowhere, apropos of a dishwasher that was running, that the roof he put on in 2013 had a 30-year warranty on it and that it was transferable, and then he went back to what he was saying about Nell's classes. That is the closest we have come. I have decided that it counts. And I have decided that if I ever need it to be more than that, I am going to have to be the one who says so out loud at a table, because he is 71 and he is not going to learn a new way of being a person, and I have known that about him since I was 9 years old, and a bicycle appeared in March. Every story on this channel is inspired by the kinds of experiences people share, and then adapted and reimagined for storytelling. Carrie and Ray and Hollis are not real people, and there is no shop on Linden Avenue. But the arithmetic is real. Somewhere tonight there is a family where one person has been quietly making the totals come out right for years, and the person signing at the bottom of the page has never once read the column above his name. So, if you are the one who fills the hole, write it down. Not to prove it later. Write it down because it happened, and because a thing that happened and was never written anywhere is a thing that can be taken away from you with one sentence at a parts counter on a Saturday. I still have the book. It is on my kitchen table. There is no shop anymore, and I still write the household numbers in it on the 28th, in pencil, in my mother's handwriting, and I sign the bottom of the page myself now. Somebody should. Somebody always was. That is the end of tonight's story. If you stayed all the way to the last page of that folder, thank you. This channel is made for the people who do the Tuesdays. The ones nobody photographs. There is a new story here every Tuesday and Friday at 8 o'clock Eastern. If you would like to be told when the next one is ready, subscribe. And if any part of tonight sounded familiar, leave a comment. I read every one of them until Friday.
Keep your receipts.